I am gaming. I am gaming. I am gaming podcast.
Hey everybody, my name is Ivica. Thank you so much for being on the latest episode of I Am Gaming podcast. This is a podcast about the video game industry, entrepreneurship, gaming nostalgia, and many more cool things I find to be in the same realm of business and creative ventures. Like always, first and foremost, a huge thanks goes to my Patreon supporters who make this podcast possible. If you're among them, thank you so much. If you're not, please check out the link in the description below, and here you can see how you can support me as well on Patreon. Even $1 per month would be more than appreciated. Of course, don't forget to check out all of my Patreon supporters and their amazing ventures in the description below. Those links will take you to their ventures, their incredible games, Twitch streams, YouTube channels, digital art collections, and so much more. That is awesome, and you'd be really fortunate to go out and check it out. Now, this is episode 135, and it's about a concept that I recently again saw has such a huge value in game design, which is the use of use case process. In game design, I believe that considering how things are done step by step is exceedingly important for creation of any game, basically, no matter what the genre might be or what type of an environment it might take place. Now, a use case process is basically a description of how users will perform particular tasks or any other process inside of a system. If you create a game, your players will have many use case scenarios where they do a bunch of stuff. These can be big, these can be small, and anything in between, but the most important thing in the process of using use case in game design is to try to comprehend what the users will actually do inside of a finished game, and then use the same information to understand in what manner should you create the said game. Now, for example, I'm working on a third-person shooter-looter system for a game I've been really fortunate enough to be a part of, and I'm presently writing use case scenarios for different types of players and how will they proceed inside of the same setup, use different abilities, use different weapons, gear and stuff to complete their missions. And that mission is not something in the game itself that the game defines, but more something that they prefer to play or they choose to do for whatever reason. Simply put, I'm developing different types of players that will interact with the game. For example, I'm developing an aggressive type of player that will go out and want to kill as many other players as possible. There are looter types of players who will want to get as much loot as possible, avoiding conflict and focusing on that. And lastly, there are what I deem stalker players who would want to kind of have an upper hand in combat but still perform combat or violence to other players only when they get a direct benefit from it. Through these, I'm developing different types of looter, aggressor, and stalker types of characters. Not in the sense of a game character, but in the sense of a player actually using this use case to get loot, to get kills, to advance in the game and be part of its progression. As I do that, some options, some issues, some difficulties and hurdles open up while I write about the use case process. I believe that the same principle is really useful in other domains as well, because hey, the same logic applies. If you figure out how the players will play your game, potential game, the game that isn't still made, you can learn a lot from it and actually use that information to create a better game. It goes back and forth because it's all a mental exercise at that point. The game, in my case, is still not finished. I'm simply using those ideas to kind of guide the further production and development of the said game. So it's basically, like I said, a mental exercise, but still a mental exercise that is really important and really useful. So I believe that you should too employ use case scenarios for your game, no matter what particular element of the game you're trying to define, and consider how the players will interact with the same small, medium, or big system. Through that information that isn't going to be factual, it's just going to be theoretical, you can still learn a lot about your present design and how the same design can be further improved. All of that is, of course, really useful for any type of game, no matter what's your market, what's your approach, or what's your audience. So consider use case scenarios, employ them, and make your game design even better with them. That's all for this episode of I'm Gaming Podcast. Thank you so much for being here and listening. Hope you found it useful. Hope you found it interesting. If you did, please consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description below. And of course, subscribe, leave a like, and leave a question or a comment if you possibly have any. That's all for this episode. This was I'm Gaming Podcast episode 135. I'll see you on episode 136 in exactly 7 days from now. Until then, have a great weekend. Bye bye.